Hey everyone, welcome to your next lecture. Before I start, I just want to say thank you for turning in your quizzes on time on Sunday. I graded them all on Monday and I enjoyed reading your essay responses. I thought some of them were very thoughtful and it was also very interesting to see who you all chose to do your responses on. Your next quiz will also be 10 points, and that'll be coming up in about 3.5 weeks from now. The next one will not have an essay question. I've heard some feedback from some of you about that, and I think I'll save an essay question again for the last quiz and then also for the final. So, with that being said, I also wanted to remind you that next week we have our visiting Wyman professor, Elizabeth Steinberg, who will be on campus Monday through Friday, doing workshops with you all, but also giving a public lecture on Wednesday, October 9th from 5:30 to 7 p.m. So do your best to make the public lecture, and one of your assignments for this course is to sign up for one of the workshops during the week that she's doing or leading. If you're already doing that with a class that you're in, that's fine. That will count towards it. The only thing that I ask is that you upload any notes or sketches or any other materials related to the workshop that you do as a file upload, a PDF, to Dropbox for grading. Okay, so I want to continue on with chapter 2 from Sturken and Cartwright in Practices of Looking, and sort of continue on with this idea of how taste is built and what producers intend in their meanings with images, but really drill down on the idea of value, collecting, and institutional critique. So this week I've given you an assignment to go into the gallery and critique two of the images that are currently on exhibition in Gallery 101 at the university. Institutional critique is very different though than say an individual critique or even a class critique of artwork. Institutional critique is something much larger and in a way helps to assign value to work, to artwork specifically, both in terms of collecting of that artwork and the value of that artwork. So what, around the idea of value, what gives an image social value? Images don't have value in of themselves. They're given or awarded different kinds of value, and that those value types might be monetarily speaking, social value, or political value, and vary depending on particular social contexts. In the art market, for example, the value of work of art is determined by economic factors, such as, but not limited to, the role played by collecting in global capital and cultural factors, including the valuing of an artist through the gallery institution or the museum institution and auction houses. So I want you all to look at this image for a minute and kind of dig around at what you see and think about what you see within the image. The collecting of art for economic and cultural capital has a long history. This is an example of a mid-17th century painting by David Teniers the Younger, and it portrays the military commander and patron of the arts, Archduke Leopold Wilhelm of Austria. The Archduke stands amid his personal collection in a gallery in the Netherlands, where during his tenure as the imperial leader, or the emperor, essentially, he amassed a vast collection of European works. This painting acts as if it's a visual collection or catalog of an art collection of the time. And if you look in there, you can see examples from the Renaissance and up until his life in the mid-17th century. So what makes a collection valuable? The most important thing, at least as signified in this painting of the Archduke, is that ownership is a key factor in establishing the value of art and in establishing a nation's political importance as well as an individual's stature. So, fast forward to the 21st century. Over the last 10 years, or actually 12 years now, the prices of paintings sold at auction houses have reached new heights. So, for example, in 2012, a pastel version of the famous 1895 Edvard Munch painting, The Scream, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with from art history, was sold by Sotheby's for a record-breaking $119.9 million. And that went to an anonymous buyer. So let me restate this. Think about Edvard Munch's painting, The Scream. This is not the original painting that sold for $119.9 million, but a pastel drawing of the famous painting, right? So the idea that art has inherent value, social value, collectability is true, but it's also equally true that art, at least through the art market, has monetary value as well. So in February 2015, which is only 9 years ago, an 1892 Paul Gauguin painting, which you're looking at right now, of two women in Tahiti titled "When Will You Marry," was sold for almost $300 million. A private Swiss collector reportedly sold the painting to the state museums of Qatar. This represents a current financial trend in the art market, the sale of modern art to collections from the Gulf states, China, and Russia, with art functioning as a new form of national capital investment in a global market. There are a lot of different values, though, that we can attribute to visual culture, not just money, beyond the economic value of an art piece. So one way that value is communicated is through display in museums, galleries, or other institutions. In some cases, we know a work of art is important because it's encased in a gilded frame and placed behind barriers. We might assume that a work of art is valuable simply because it is so carefully displayed in a prestigious museum, as in this case with Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa, which is displayed in a gold frame in a climate-controlled room behind bulletproof glass to protect it from weather and potential vandals among the 6 million people who view it annually. By the way, the Mona Lisa is in the Louvre. Maybe some of you have actually seen it in person. I have. It was in the 1990s, and it was a fairly similar scene in the 1990s as is being shown in this more recent image that I'm presenting. The painting's valued because it's unique, yes, but also, and this is probably equally important, because it's highly marketable and reproducible. The Mona Lisa has been reproduced endlessly on posters, postcards, coffee mugs, and t-shirts. Ordinary consumers can own a copy of the highly valued original. And I'd ask, do any of you have a Mona Lisa magnet or poster or mug or anything? If you've gone to the Louvre, chances are you probably do. In his essay on practices of collecting, which was called On Collecting Art and Culture, cultural theorist James Clifford maps the movement of art and cultural artifacts in relationship to changes in their classification and value. Clifford adapts what he calls the semiotic square, which was designed by semiotician A.J. Grimas, to map how certain objects, for instance, authored artworks in a museum, are valued as authentic, and other objects are seen as cultural artifacts or not art, for which authorship is unimportant. Clifford's point is that non-Western art is devalued in the art world because it is designated as culture. And what other kinds of objects, and that other kinds of objects, souvenirs, curios, fakes, and reproductions, are placed lower on a cultural hierarchy that moves from authentic to inauthentic. So in this art culture system, machine for making authenticity, you can see up here at the top we have something that's authentic, and down here at the bottom we have something that's inauthentic. Inside of the square, on the left we have masterpiece, and on the right we have artifact. So those are the four corners of the square, or of this machine: masterpiece, artifact, authentic, inauthentic. Within that square we have art, which is considered original and singular, and then opposite of art we have culture, which is called traditional or collective. And then you cruise down from culture, you have non-culture, something that's new and uncommon, and often art and non-culture are related to one another. And then kitty corner from art, you have not art, which falls under culture, which is something that's reproduced in commercial. And you can see there can be crossover. And in the last lecture, I was able to hopefully give you some examples of both art that was considered low culture and high culture, and art that crossed over boundaries. So for example, like Shepard Fairey's Obey logo. Around the outside of the square, in the area of authentic and masterpiece, we have the number 1, and under 1 we have connoisseurship, so the idea of someone who knows something about what they're collecting, things like the art museum or the art market. So those are the experts of connoisseurship of things like art and masterpieces and not culture. Across the way we have number 2, which is history and folklore, ethnographic museums, museums of history, material cultures, and craft. So 2 falls solidly in between authentic and artifact and culture, and also is considered not art, at least within this system. A kitty corner at number 3, we have things like fakes, inventions, things like the Science Museum, museums of technology, ready-mades, and anti-art. That falls between masterpiece and inauthentic, and also not culture. And last but not least, we have 4, which is tourist art commodities, things like that are curios. So for example, your Mona Lisa, magnets, etc., and utilities. And that falls between inauthentic and artifact. I'm not saying I necessarily agree with this system, but it's a good way to think about an art culture system in relation to market realities. What do you think? Although the context in which contemporary art is collected includes dealers, galleries, fairs, auction houses as the primary arbiters of taste and value, there's also a parallel set of practices in the collecting of cultural artifacts. This appears in the culture section of the chart. These collections are primarily organized around notions of cultural authenticity. In the early 1990s, the anthropologists Elisa Barbash and Lucien Taylor followed Gabe Barre, a West African merchant who traded in carved wooden figures produced by members of his village and surrounding communities. The anthropologists Barbash and Taylor revealed the complex role of insider figures such as Barre in the transit of local cultural art and artifacts to the global art market. Their products have, since in the era of colonialism, included iconic Cologne figures carved by Africans, which parody the colonial European authorities and the connoisseurs who covet their authentic reproductions. So in this example, we have these West African carved Cologne figures for sale online at the Colonial Soldier, which is a website that you could purchase them from. But you can see that that they're, again, a parody of the colonial figures that occupied Africa. In the institutional context of museums and galleries, viewers can engage in a broad array of viewing practices of both art and culture. Some of these practices are in a concert with institutional missions, such as art pedagogy, like, for example, what you're doing right now, learning, or also, for example, listening to audio commentaries or a museum's mobile phone app. And there are some in defiance of them, as when we move quickly through an exhibition, skipping over many works or making ironic or critical interpretations on the basis of our own individual taste, politics, or cultural knowledge. This is an example of photographer Thomas Struth's Hermitage 1. He produced a series of photographs of people viewing art in museums to capture the complexity of these kinds of art viewing practices. These photographs, which are normally displayed within a museum or a gallery, give a sense of the varied responses that ordinary people have to the art. Struth took these photographs in some of the most famous museums around the world, capturing images of people gazing at, scrutinizing, and walking past famous works of art. In this image, visitors at the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg, Russia, display a full range of responses to art, turning away, listening to audio commentary without looking at the work, looking at it intently, looking at other people. All sorts of things happen and play out in a museum. Struth created these images with a large format camera and displays them as very large prints, effectively replicating the viewer's experience they portray. These photographs give us a sense of the range of responses and expressions of taste that can be found in museums. They also convey, in part through their large size, the sense of presence of the large works of art in an exhibition. Struth has remarked that art is fetishized through museum exhibition, and his image points to the central role that museums play in designating which images and objects are valuable by creating the conditions, majestic, pristine, or gritty, for example, within which art is displayed. So, thinking about this photograph, I'd like you to think about a time that you've been to a museum. It could be the Minneapolis Institute of Art or the Walker Art Center, for example, and think about how you looked at the work and what made you look at the work and how it made you look at the work. Art that engages with institutional critique can be traced back to the Dada interventions of Marcel Duchamp, who was a French artist who radically challenged taste and aesthetics. In the 1910s, Duchamp took a jab at the veneration of art objects with his ready-mades. Mundane, everyday objects such as bicycle wheel that he called art and exhibited in galleries, for example. In 1917, Duchamp contributed a urinal titled Fountain and signed with the pseudonym R. Mutt to a highly publicized painting exhibition he helped to organize. The exhibition's organizers were completely offended by the piece, and it was a clear message, its clear message about art's value and display practices, and they promptly threw it out of the show. This is a good example, going back to the previous slide, of the machine, how it's not culture, new and uncommon, and also a ready-made or anti-art, and how that broke through from number 3 to number 1 in the computer. Dada helped to inspire many art movements that critique the art market system, including political art, guerrilla art, performance art and happenings, and other ephemeral kinds of art that could not be commodified in the form of valued objects. So the last slide for the lecture today is a piece of work by an artist named Fred Wilson, and it's titled Guarded View. And this is an installation view from the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York from 1991. Wilson displays life-size headless statues of museum guards, forcing viewers to ponder directly those subjects who are rendered invisible by the museum's dynamics of the gaze. Whereas most of the guards in the U.S. art museums are either Black or Latino, most museum patrons are white. This installation foregrounds the issue of race in relation to labor and museum marketing practices, asking museum goers to notice the human presence of guards who are usually ignored when we focus on the art. By displaying the invisible figure of the guard, Wilson brings attention to the selectivity of our gaze, which readily excludes those underpaid low-level employees who've always been fully present in the visual field of the museum gallery. Okay, so that's your lecture for today. There'll be another entry, your fourth entry into your sketchbook or your notebook related to this lecture, as well as this week's reading as well. Okay, I hope you're all doing well, and like I say, if you have any questions for me, feel free to email me or stop by during my office hours on Monday and Wednesdays. I hope you're all doing well, and talk to you soon. Bye.